I'm Chris Canary.
And I'm Kelton Wright.
Follow our quest to publish our first novels.
From first drafts to query letters,
through inevitable rejection,
and hopefully eventual success.
From California
to Colorado, this is Pen Pals.
Chris Aaron.
Hi, Kelton.
Do you think people can tell our voices apart today?
No.
I'm back from the trenches of daycare again. Lucky me. Wild guess at how it has impacted my goals.
I'm so sorry that you're not feeling well. I hate that for you. And it's like summer.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be sick in the summer. It's not summer yet, but it will be summer soon.
Honestly,
I'm so sorry.
I'm sort of grateful for it because it means that I can go like sit outside on the front stoop on the leeward side of the house and just like be in the warm sun. Speaking of leeward, I did want to talk about my goals because one of them, listen, did I work on the newsletter? Almost not at all. I wrote like one more paragraph. Did I have a writing session? Not about the novel. And then the other goal for this week was a one-pager on a Caribbean love story. And I did manage to get out of the wind on that one. Not only did I write a one-pager, I plotted out the entire book.
Oh my gosh, Kelton.
I just got high on memories and was just like, I'm going to map out the whole rom-com. And so I did. I have a whole plot structure for a rom-com that is inspired by my time living in the Caribbean. Not based on, inspired by, just in case I ever write this book. And I was really jazzed about that. And then I just I went down like a real hole where I was like, yet again, here's Kelton Wright not finishing the project she's working on in favor of starting something new.
Well, at least you got something done. That's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Listen, we're creative people, and sometimes our creative spirits take us in different directions than what our analytical minds had planned. But that's okay.
Wouldn't
it
it
sounds
be
like
fun
you had
if I
fun.
I didn't tell you which novel you're gonna get at the end of summer.
I'm down for whatever your beautiful brain is willing to deliver to my inbox.
Many, many, many moons ago, an old friend I had in New York named Ian, when I was writing the dating blog, he was always like, why don't you just write romance? Like, you're already writing it about your personal life. You already have the audience. Like, why don't you just write romance and like leave your smutty little adventures to yourself? And I think of Ian often giving that advice because I'm like, he was right. I definitely at 28 should have just like started trying to write romance instead of being like, I'm going to go into the corporate world and suck all the creativity out of my writing for 5 years.
No, I think it takes some time and distance from your romantic escapades to be able to write romance effectively. So I think you're writing it at the perfect time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Date by Numbers because I have been looking at some of our survey responses from our listener survey. So listeners, we are still collecting data for our listener survey. If you have yet to take it, please do so. It will be linked in the show notes and on social media and in all the places. But one of the questions we ask in the survey is, how did you find Pen Pals? And someone answered, I've been following Kelton since the Date by Number days. Isn't that nice?
It makes me feel so good. It just like warms my cold, icy Capricorn heart. It's the best. It's the best.
Someone also said that we sound nothing alike and people are crazy. That made me feel better too.
Oh, I love that person.
It's great. We're getting a lot of really good feedback, both lovely and rightfully critical. So please go and take the survey. This week, I don't remember what my goals were.
Oh, I do.
True Chris Aaron fashion. What were
they?
Let
me tell you, your goal was to decide what to submit for the MFA program, who to request for an advisor. You were basically going to figure out a lot of MFA stuff, and then you were also going to write once.
Okay, so I didn't do any of that. But I did try. So, in all fairness, I went into my portal for my MFA program and tried to access all of that stuff, and it just wasn't there yet. I think I'm still early. So, I'm waiting. I'm waiting. And I'm
Okay.
also looking for very explicit instructions for the submission for the workshop. I know that in our orientation session, they had said 5,000 words. But I just wanted to double confirm in case there might be more words that I could submit.
Yeah.
So I didn't really touch that so much. What I did do, I did write once this week. I wrote around 600 words, and it was really because I had this new character. I was thinking about what you said about getting characters out of your brain and into the world, and that is really what I did. Is I had this new character in the story come to me, and I had written half a scene and I brought her into it, and it was really fun. And so I introduced her to the book, and that was, like I said, like 600 words. My one time of writing, I did get that done. I did do that. So yeah, I did half of my goals, and the other half were my fault. I'm not claiming that.
I mean, I think that's great. We both got a little bit of our goals done.
Yeah.
Am I feeling confident about the week ahead? No, I'm feeling like I'm going to be sick the whole time.
Really, are you at the beginning of it or at the end of your illness?
This is day 3, and it's just been getting worse.
The hell? What the
Which,
hell do you
you know,
have?
I don't know. We had some kind of stomach bug from daycare that just barreled right into body chills and headaches and congestion. It's like a mild flu, which is the 4th time I've had
I
the
was gonna
flu
say
this
it
year.
sounds like the flu.
Yeah, so it's been really fun. But, what are you going to do? I was thinking about my advice last week to the writer to like start something new now that her baby is like 9 months. And I want to update that with like start with urgency, because as soon as that baby goes to daycare, your immune system is going to fall apart.
Don't say that to her. She only has like a certain amount of time before she has to go back to work because she's on maternity leave. Don't give her more stress and pressure.
No, just have as much fun with writing as you can while you are unburdened from work and daycare. As much fun with the writing. That's my advice now. Do whatever is the most fun part.
The slogging bit you can get to later.
Thankfully, for my goals this week, we do have someone I love on the podcast. Heather Hansman is joining us. If you are not familiar with Heather, she is an award-winning freelance writer and the celebrated author of Powder Days, Ski Bums, Ski Towns, and the Future of Chasing Snow, as well as Downriver, Into the Future of Water in the West. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Outside, all the places I want to be published. And she lives in Durango, just south of me, right by the river. And she has a new book coming out called Fierce Country, which is the inspiring untold story of 3 incredible women who spearheaded recreation, conservation, and resilience in America's most beloved landscapes. If you are a fan of Pam Houston and David Grann, I cannot recommend Heather Hansman enough. I've been lucky enough to take a class with her in Telluride. She is so generous. She is so smart. And I love the way she captures the West in her writing. And I can't wait to introduce her to all of you and to learn more about like what it actually takes to get nonfiction out in the world, like published by real publishers. So without further ado, let us bring in Heather Hansman. Heather, yay! It's good to see you again. It's been like at least a year.
I know. Yeah, since the library.
Just enough time for you to write another book.
Yeah, it only took me a year, totally.
You've written a few books now. Tell us your origin story as an author. How did the first book come about? How did you get agented? Are you still with your agent?
Yeah, this is a good story. I mean, this is maybe a trusting your gut story. But like I mentioned, I had been freelancing for a while, and I had written a story for, did you guys ever read California Sunday magazine? I was around for a few years. It was sort of like the New York Times magazine of the California papers. And it was this really great, monthly magazine. They did all these cool stories. And I wrote a story for them about this mobile butcher shop where these people would like drive around in a truck and like help small farmers slaughter their cattle. Like totally random thing. And an agent who I later learned was like a baby agent. She was just starting to look for clients. She'd been an assistant. I was her first like real client, but I didn't know that at the time. She reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I read the story. I really liked it. Are you interested in book writing at all? Do you have any ideas?" And I was like, "Yep, yep, yep, totally. I have like a million book ideas. But I'm leaving to go on a river trip. Can we talk in a week?" And she was like, "Yeah, totally." And then I was like, "Oh fuck, I need a book idea." Um, and I had like had these things swirling, but I definitely didn't have anything that was like cogent. And I was really like the idea of writing a book was like really romantic to me. You know, it felt like this kind of like, oh, then I'll be a real writer. Um, and so I came back from this trip and got on a call with her, and I was like, and I had been a river guide for a long time before I was a journalist. That was sort of like my, other cool, stable, normal career. And I'd written my grad school thesis about water use, and I was like, hey, what about a book about water use in the Western US? Like that seems like it's this big issue. I'm thinking about it on the river. I know people are talking about it. I haven't ever read a book that like explains that in a way that I want to understand it. And she was basically like, that is a topic. That's not a book. Come back to me when you have think about how like that story could be told, and like then we can keep talking. And she's a total fairy godmother. She's no longer my agent. She quit agenting pretty recently, which was like totally, totally devastating for me. But we sort of started working on that idea. She kind of gave me some pointers about how to write a pitch, and we came up with this idea to tell the story of all that through this big river trip. So I ended up paddling the length of the Green River, which is the biggest tributary of the Colorado, to kind of give that concept and narrative and a story. So she really helped me work on that. And then we pitched it out. Nobody wanted it, which I think was fair. And like a lot of the feedback on that, and nonfiction is, different than pitching fiction, where you're pitching a proposal versus a full manuscript. So I think it's like easier in a lot of ways because you don't have to, it didn't feel like as big of a commitment, but it's also like more of a gamble in some ways because they're buying it based on an idea. And the feedback on that was like, interesting idea, but like, she's never written a book before. This feels unproven. We can't commit to it. So we worked on it again, pitched it out again. One person wanted it. And I was so like enamored of the idea of writing a book that I was like, I will take whatever they give me. Like, let's make this happen.
Did you start writing it during that process, or were you just like sitting on the idea waiting for approval on it?
Written through, so typically, and maybe you guys have covered this before, but typically with like a nonfiction proposal, you write a couple sample chapters and then you write through a plan for the rest of the book. So I had enough background research and kind of scene and story that I could put together a couple sample chapters. And then I did a good chunk of like reporting and research to kind of come up with what I thought the flow of the rest of the book would be. And of course, it totally changed based on like the actual trip and reporting that I did, but I had a decently solid framework.
Nice. That's awesome. Talk to me a little about performance in the nonfiction space. We do meet with a lot of fiction writers, or when they're nonfiction, it's more like a craft book. I love nonfiction. I'm constantly recommending nonfiction to people, and it's hard to get them to buy in. There's this idea that nonfiction is like homework. And that the books aren't compelling or fun to read. And I'm always like, no, let me give you my roster. In that performance space, what was your publisher hoping for? What were you hoping for?
I don't think they ever gave me metrics on that. And I think you have a sense, and I think this is probably true in fiction, that you want to, whatever your advance is, if you make that back, then you're doing okay. And you hear a lot right now, or at least in my bubble, about the death of nonfiction and how people aren't reading as much. And if you look at the New York Times bestseller list, it tends to be like the dad books about shipwrecks and self-help books and maybe celebrity memoirs. So I think there is a sense for me and among people who are like working on books like this that I talk to, that it does feel like you're fighting a tide of trying to get people's attention. And I think now, especially in the nonfiction world, a lot of podcasts are telling stories in ways that books maybe used to. There's so much more, I think this is probably true of fiction as well. There's so much more chatter in the room that it's harder to break through. But I think, kind of like you were saying, the books that have been like the most important to me in my life have been like, I could show you the bookshelf right there. They have been those sort of nonfiction books that feel like they explain the world in a way that cracks my brain open or shows me something that I didn't know. So I think for me, it's can I try, and this is very high-minded, you probably never get there, but can I try and write those kinds of things that were important to me? It's like you want to be putting this stuff out in the world that is the stuff that you want. And I think, again, it's like that balance between like, what is the market? What would do well? What are people going to buy? And what's the thing that I want to make? And I don't think there's a perfect balance in that at all, but it's somewhere in there is where I want to be. If I can get the scary sales performance stuff out of my head, that's a good place to be.
It's funny, I think with nonfiction, for some people, the idea of approaching it is a little scary because of the research and the interviews and knowing where to start. Obviously, you weren't always a writer. You had your first researched piece. What is that process like for you where you're like, I'm actually going to talk to this mobile butcher cart in depth. I'm going to move past small talk and make them talk to me. Like, how do you do that?
Oh man, that feels so much less scary to me than, or like less hard to me than trying to create a world out of nowhere. Because I feel like that. I'm like, I tried to write a little bit of fiction and it's always, I sent some chapters to my agent in like early COVID when I wasn't doing anything else. And she was like, I feel like this is a thinly veiled version of your own life. Like creating a world feels so much harder than taking what exists and trying to explain it and put the pieces together. And I think that's a really cool part of my job when it's, whether it's, journalism and stories or whether it's sort of like the book stuff that spans a bigger scope of something that like I get to be nosy and I get to call people up and kind of say, hey, explain to me what it is that you do. And I think for the most part, and this is maybe something I've learned over time, that like people are usually pretty happy to talk about themselves and like pretty psyched when somebody's curious about them. And whatever, I'm like psyched to get to talk to you guys. Like it feels good to have somebody ask you about things.
What's the difference between a great magazine piece and you're like, oh, this one's a book?
I mean, I think that goes back to your like people's hang up with nonfiction. I think this is maybe catty of me, but I think there are a lot of nonfiction books that like could have been better served as articles. I think that like when there's sort of one tidy arc or one character, or you can sum it up, a lot of things don't need 80,000 words. And I think for me, what has felt like a book is when what seems like the initial question keeps pulling in other questions and other storylines and it can't be contained. Like Fierce Country, this book that's coming out soon, is in theory about these women who changed how we do recreation and conservation stories, whose stories never got told. It was sort of this history of women outside, and they all have these kind of interesting stories, but there also were these deeper layers about how we think about public land and who feels comfortable and where the history of conservation came from and sexual abuse outside. There was all these other things that were their own stories that then were the connected threads in this book. So I don't think there's any obvious answer, but I feel like there is. When you can keep it contained, it's a story, and when it's expansive, it's a book.
Let's talk about Fierce Country. Tell our readers a little about how it came to be, what it's about, and it's a real braided story, it sounds like. How did you decide who your three protagonists were?
Yeah, so the three protagonists are Georgie White, I'm actually curious if you guys have heard of any of these people. Georgie White was one of the first Grand Canyon guides. She was the first woman down there for decades, the only woman. And she really shaped how we get outside, how we manage public land, like who gets to get out. And she was also this like total character. Like I had been a river guide for a long time. I had like heard stories about her that she only wore leopard print. She only hired hot firefighters to be her guides. She lived on beer and hard-boiled eggs. She was like this total eccentric character. And when I dug in, there was also so much more about how she really had to like fight for her place there and got harassed, and nobody took her seriously for decades and decades and decades, even though she was the one kind of shaping the line of what was happening. So her story is really about why we want to get outside and who gets to feel comfortable in these outdoor places, which I've worked in that outdoor world for basically my whole career. And I guess to kind of back up to your original question, there's some core material in it about what that space is like. So Powder Days came out, and I think this is probably true of fiction as well, but the publishing company then has first rights of refusal for your next book idea. And I had pitched basically a book of essays, and my editor was like, sorry, like not gonna go. And when we were talking, he was like, I really loved the stories of the women in Powder Days. Some of those were really compelling to me. Do you think there's anything there? And I was immediately like, I don't want to write a girl book. I don't know. Don't like niche me in there. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why do I feel so resistant to that? What's happening in my brain right now that pushes back on that? And so I started going down that thread about like, and I've often been like the only woman in a lot of these spaces, what that's felt like, how that shaped my experience, and like where that story came from. And I kind of like pulled that thread back to be like, I didn't have, for lack of a better word, heroes. I didn't have people to look up to. You look at the shelf right there, Abby and although Leopold are on it, so many of the stories I was hearing were about, of like how you could be out in these places were about men. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but I don't think that's actually true. And I think that's sort of like where the antenna went up and the story sort of started swirling. And Georgie had been in Downriver. Like she had kind of like popped up through that story. And then Dolores LaChapelle, who's another one of the women that I look like. Have you heard of her, Kelton? She's local.
No,
Kelton and
I haven't.
Live, 40 miles away from each other over a bunch of mountains. She was kind of one of like the first big mountain skiers in the US. She was there when Aspen was starting. Her husband was like the first avalanche forecaster. So she was like, and of course it's the husband gets the credit. So she was there in the early days of skiing becoming a thing. She wrote a book about it, that the touchstone for weirdos who want to commit their life to being on snow. But she was really an environmental philosopher. The way she wanted to be seen and taken seriously was that she had all these kind of ideas about how we're responsible to the places that we recreate, what it means to be connected to a landscape, kind of all these things that we're thinking about now. Her thinking was like really pivotal in the radical environmental movement in the 70s. But all of her ideas were what led people to, trying to take down dams and spiking logging operations and tree sitting and that kind of thing. But she wasn't taken seriously. And she came up in Powder Days too. She was like in the ether of that. So there were these women who had kind of, without me realizing it, kind of like been in the thinking. And when I started to kind of pull back and think about it, I was like, oh, these people have shaped me in ways that I haven't totally been able to see and understand. And if I give it some oxygen, I can sort of start to see the story. And the third woman is Anne LaBastille, who was a mountain guide. She was a hermit in the Adirondacks. She lived off the grid in this cabin. That's like totally my dream in a lot of, not based in my reality ways. And she was also one of the first people to track climate change, helped get the Clean Air Act passed. From this kind of like backwoods cabin, was changing policy in all these ways. And so she's kind of like the connective thread between what does it mean to be outside? Why does that feel important? And then how do we actually protect these places? And what does it mean now? So there's sort of this bridge between those three women.
I love that two of them were just tracking you the whole time in your other writing, waiting for their opportunity.
Yeah, when I moved down here after I had worked on Powder Days and I was doing a book event in Durango, and somebody asked me that. They were like, did Dolores bring you here? And I was like, no. And then I was like,
You're like, oh, wait.
Yeah. But it's like so interesting how you're marinating on all that stuff and you don't know when it's actually going to come.
I still am curious, like, how do you decide to put them together in a book? Because it feels like you could write a memoir about any of these. I can't remember. What is the name for when it's like you're writing a memoir about somebody else, an autobiography? Nope, that's when you do it
Yeah,
yourself.
Biography.
Biography. Yeah,
A biography. Thank you. How did you decide to go with this braided story rather than a biography of any one of these women?
I think that goes back to the what's the story versus what's the book question. And I
Mhm.
think they're all they all have these wild adventure stories. They're like interesting on their own. But for me, the heart of it, the thing that was like interesting to me wasn't just here's a cool life. It was like, how does that show up now? What does it mean to dedicate your life to being outside in all these different ways? And the way I've kind of been thinking about it is Georgie's kind of the what, and then Anne is the how do we do it, and Dolores is the why. So it's like
Beautiful.
by combining their stories together, it's like you get the big picture. And I think there are so many, once you kind of open the door, there are so many stories. It could have been, there are other people I totally could have talked about or pulled in, but to make this narrative cohesive, I had to stop it somewhere too. So being able to use their stories to pull those threads gave it a little bit of shape and stopped it from being a zillion pages long or a different kind of story if it had just been a bunch of people.
Talk to me a little about the actual process of this book, like archive hunting, interviewing people. Are these women all still alive or not? I genuinely don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
they're
what was
all,
the
none of them.
reporting process?
Yeah, it was really, and so much of my past stuff has been I can go show up in a place, talk to the sources, tell a story about them, and the characters often animate the story in a lot of ways. It's me being like, okay, I'm with Joe Schmo in a field. Now we're following him. And these women are all dead and they had no living children. And so a lot of the reporting was like wormholing into archives, trying to find people who had known them and worked with them. Dolores is super interesting. She passed away, I can't remember, 2011 when she passed away, and her ex-husband, the guy who'd been the avalanche forecaster, died. He was living in Alaska. He had come out for her funeral and then went skiing at Monarch and had a heart attack while he was skiing, 10 days after her funeral. So he passed away and they had this big archive together. He passed away, and then their son, who was in his 50s maybe, passed away of cancer pretty soon after. And so all of their archive material went to his much younger girlfriend at the time. And she had been sitting on these boxes and she lives in Durango where I live, but she had all these, her whole spare room was filled with their archive and had just been like sitting there because she knew it was important, but she didn't know what to do with it.
What a
And
curious burden.
yeah, and definitely an interesting, physical and emotional burden. But she had
Yeah.
kind of been looking for a reason to sort through it and get it out of her house. So I got to go sift through all this stuff with her. And it ended up going to the
Wow.
Historical Society in Silverton. But so I got, just by kind of like being around, I got access to like all this. It was like her journals, this weird artwork that her son had done, like all sorts of stuff. So in a lot of ways, like being curious about this opened up all sorts of cool, and like that was, I spent a bunch of days with her and only used a fraction of it, but yeah, it's been a really different kind of research, and it's also been hard to know when, this is the hard part I think in the nonfiction stuff where you're like, I have all of history, how do I sort it down to try and like put some bounds around it.
Yeah.
My first draft, my editor, when we were talking about it, he was like, yeah, it can be, send the draft. It can be baggy. We'll cut it down. And I sent it to him and he was like, did you send me the wrong document? This is twice as long as what we talked about. So a lot of it was then culling and editing and making sure I could really focus the story. As we're recording, I am, 5 weeks and 3 days out from the release date. So right now I am doing a lot of the kind of promotion work that feels really different from the actual writing work. Like it's a lot of blasting myself on social media in a way that feels unnatural and icky, and reaching out to people and poking publications and doing that piece of getting the work out in the world that feels really removed from the actual writing part, but is part of the machine of getting it out there.
Totally. Do you have any support in doing that, or are you a one-woman show for that?
I have a publicist from the publishing company, and she is wonderful and helpful and responsive, but she has a lot of other projects that are in the works at the same time. And she lives in New York. She is removed from a lot of the stuff that I write about, which is kind of the overlap between the outdoor world, and this book's a lot about like gender and who gets to show up in those places. So she's not necessarily like in those niches. So a lot of the kind of reaching out and knowing where it might resonate and kind of like who it goes to is on me. And I think that's like true. I think you hear that a lot in publishing, that people are like, I have a publicist, but they're not doing anything. And I don't think it's like necessarily that they're not doing anything, but like their work operates in this tier that's like fairly different from where it actually hits on the ground.
Yeah, I can see her being like, well, we'll get you into Outside Magazine. And you're like, yep.
Cool.
Like
yeah. Or like,
first one.
I'll get you on this random podcast that you've never heard of. And you're like, okay, great. But like, I don't know if that's going to actually connect with people who care about this at all.
Speaking of this general outdoor space, I do kind of want to step back from Fierce Country for a minute. You have the dream career for an outdoor writer. I think like the only way you could romanticize it more is if you like did all of this from a van all the time. But like it's an amazing career you've built for yourself in this space that doesn't get all the traction I think it deserves. So talk to me a little about what your actual career looks like week to week as a full-time writer, editor in this space.
Yeah, thank you. And for saying that, but also I think behind the curtain, it's a lot less sexy than it might seem from the outside. So my background is in journalism. I went to journalism school, which I do not necessarily think is important for any of this, but I was a magazine editor for a while at outdoor and ski magazines. And then I started freelancing probably almost 15 years ago now because I wanted to write more, and that kind of felt like the way to actually be doing the work instead of editing and putting things together. I felt pretty far from the creative side of it. So since then, my work has been sort of a mishmash of magazine stories. I've been working on books for the last 8 or 9 years. It kind of is this like pieced together of all sorts of different kinds of projects. I operate in this outdoor space, which I think often feels sort of like romantic and exciting. And I think when I was first thinking about being a writer, I looked at places like Outside Magazine, I was like, oh, this is like, you get to go and have these adventures and write about it, which I have been lucky enough to do. Like I do get to do that a little bit, but a lot of the work is less, especially now, is more, I spend a lot of time in front of my computer. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's not all like me outside living in a van, like John Krakauer style on top of mountains. So I feel really lucky that I get to do what I do, but I think it's like anything, there's also sort of like the grindy part, the pitching part. There's so many pieces that you have to hold together to, I think, make a career in this space. And there are some really shiny pieces, but there are also are some really like, a lot of it is pitching. A lot of it is trying to build relationships with people. A lot of it, as media changes, is trying to kind of like hit a ball you don't even see coming as things are changing. So yeah, like I feel really lucky to get to do what I do, but it also is unstable and changing and grindy and, takes a lot of work.
Do you have any kind of framework for that? I know right now you're really focused on the book, but in a time when you're in the research phase, are you like, okay, on Mondays I spend 2 hours thinking of pitches, on Tuesdays I reach out to my editors? Are you driven more by inspiration and what's coming top of mind, or is there a framework that you follow being freelance?
I would love to say I'm driven by inspiration, but I don't think that's true at all. I think when I first started freelancing, I was pretty clear with myself that I was like, if I want this to be my job, I'm going to treat it like a job, and I'm going to show up, in my office, which is here every day. Like framework wise, I have like weird tricks I try and play on myself. Like I take myself for a commute in the morning. Like I go for my little walk around my neighborhood, and then I'm like, okay, now you're at work. And I think over the years I've gotten a little more flexible with that. If somebody wants to go for a run at lunchtime, I will be more flexible about that. But I try to be really intentional. What works for me is like having at least structure around my time, and like in my head being like, if you're going to be serious about this, you're serious about this. And I know other people who are freelancers who are like, I went surfing all day and then I worked from 4 p.m. to midnight. And that just doesn't work for my brain and like how I want to show up in the world as a human and interact with other people and have some sort of normalcy. So I think day to day, it really depends on what projects I'm cranking on and what is in the mix of things. And that tends to vary pretty widely depending on what's happening. But like in the big frame of the structure, I'm like, I go to my desk job.
I actually really love that. I feel like when we ask that question, more often it is answered by the inspiration side than it is by like, I'm going to stick to these rules and have these habits. I'm obsessed with you going for a commute walk. I feel like I'm stealing that almost immediately.
Well,
Starting
also
my day
I get
tomorrow.
there's a way that you can slip pretty easily from bed to coffee to work without changing your clothes. You can get pretty gremlin mode pretty easily if you don't, or for me at least, if I don't have those breakup points. So it's helpful for me
Yeah,
to be like, you're a real person. This is, this is serious.
I love that. So tell me, what are you optimizing for right now? It's in your broader writing career beyond just getting publicity ready. Are you like, no, I write books now? Or are you like, I do whatever drives my income? Or is it more about, curiosity? When you're at your job, you've taken your walk, what is the number one goal at the top of this job description?
Yeah, I love that question because I don't think I've ever thought about that in that sort of like, how do I decide what I'm pushing for? And I think maybe this sounds a little wooey and self important or something like that, but I think there's a level that I always want to be optimizing for stories. And I think that's regardless of whether that's a book or an article, there is that like, I don't know if you guys get this, but I like, you get that sense of, ooh, my antenna is up. This one is good. That sort of spark, which can come and go and, not be consistent. That kind of, ooh, this is a good one, I think is like the best feeling in all of that. And I would love to always be chasing that, but I think there's a balance in that also with this level of practicality. And maybe I'm like too much of a Capricorn in all this. I do want this to be, stable and sustainable and the thing that I can do and keep doing. So there is that sort of titrating between I want to be chasing the cool thing and follow that instinct of what I'm excited about, which I think is what I try to trust. If I'm excited about something, readers will be excited about that too. So that instinct is good, but there also is that balance of congruency and keeping it going too. So I think
Yeah.
that maybe I'm not optimizing for anything because it's like you're trying to hold all the pieces together.
I'm
But I'm
curious,
thinking about those.
do you know your moon and rising sign?
I knew the minute you said you were a Capricorn that Kelton was going to ask that question.
I'm
I
also
was
a
gonna be like,
Capricorn
let me see
sun.
if I can find. I have it. Yeah, keep talking. I know it's like in here somewhere. I can find it.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Ooh, this is a good one. Ben and I joke about this a lot because whenever I have that feeling about an essay, it does poorly. And anytime that I'm like, this one sucked, it's like the best response possible. When I think it sucks, people love it.
But it's also I think this is the problem with we're all too online and getting too much feedback now.
Mhm.
Trusting that response versus trusting your own gut is, I think, a weird slippery slope. Because it's
And I
also
think
like
that,
you don't always know how it lands.
yeah, and it ties back to like just keep doing the work and
Yeah,
like have your
totally.
schedule, because it's like I'm writing every week regardless. So I'm like, if I get, a poor response versus a good one, I'm still showing up at the desk to write another one.
Totally. And it's like it's not all gonna hit all the time. Like you can't expect it to.
Well, take us back to the first good one. You've been an editor.
Yeah, I was a magazine editor for a while, which
Mhm.
I think has been really helpful in me both knowing how to pitch things and being like a little emotionally removed from the drama of pitching because I know what it's like to be in the room where you're like, okay, this is a good idea, but it's just not a fit right now. I think that's helped me. I mean, obviously, I take everything personally, but it's helped me take things less personally in a lot of ways. And to have when I was working at magazines, we got so many pitches that were like, I want to write about Mount Everest. And you're like, okay, what about Mount Everest? So I think even just having that sense of what are the pieces that you need to make a story. I often think about it too. It's like the editor and I are on the same team and we're like trying to make something good together. And as a freelancer, as somebody who's pitching a book from the outside, it's like I'm trying to make their job as easy as possible so they'll pick me. So what can I do to show them where the book is going to fit on the shelf, give them like all the breadcrumbs to know that I'll do a good job. So I think that sense, I think, has been really helpful to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious from that angle, like, what do you think most beginning nonfiction writers kind of miss about pitching or about the narrative?
I think there is that sense of pitching, especially for magazine stuff. And I think this is true for books as well. This is maybe cynical, but it can't just be a great story. It has to be a great story that's in with the publication or in the market. Or I think I've had to dial back my starry-eyedness about as long as the story is beautiful, it'll sell. Because I don't think that's true, especially in this kind of book economy, which sucks, but which is reality. So I think that sense of what is the story? Where does the story go? I think, especially with younger writers or beginner writers or people who kind of haven't written much but feel like they have a personal story in them, I think it can be really easy to get fixated on what it felt like to you and what the details were, like what that internal piece is versus what it's going to be like for the reader. So I think that sense of like when you're trying to get published, yes, you want it to be that thing that lights you up and feels true and organic, but it also you're not just what I write for myself in my little journal is really different than what gets published. So I think that sense of it has to be important and true, but it also has to resonate outside of myself is important. And I think that's hard too, because there's no formula for that. There's no, this is exactly how to do it. But that sense of an audience and sense of, how is this going to show up in the world is important. And it's not literary or romantic or exciting, but I think it's real.
Yeah. Speaking of this is how you do it, in addition to being an author and a freelance writer and an editor, you're also a teacher. So a little bit, you do say this is how to do it. How did teaching come in? Because I've taken a workshop with you and I loved it. It was super fun. It felt really generous. It was like, some of those workshops I've taken, they just have this air of competitiveness to them. And I didn't feel that at all with you. So talk to me a little about your teaching journey.
Yeah, I think that this is different all the time. I have no concrete answers for how to do it. I think if somebody's like, this is the way to do it, they're selling you something. That's like part of what makes writing so interesting and like interesting to teach too. I think that there's the craft piece of, okay, this is how we think about balance or sentence structure or building scenes or that kind of thing. But there's also that like ephemeral art piece where like the three of us could all write the same scene about being on a call together and it would look totally different for all of us. And I think you can't teach that. You just have to cultivate that and work on it and dial in what feels good and right. So I think there's like a piece of teaching where I can say, hey, this is what I've learned. This is what I feel works well. This is what has been hard for me and that I've had to really crank on to make sense. But there's also a bit of like, you just have to do it and keep doing it. And the writing is like what teaches you how to do the writing. And I started teaching after Downriver came out. I got an opportunity to do a week-long writing workshop on the Green River, which is what the story is based on, which is like one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do. And I was really nervous about that because I think I felt this imposter syndrome of I was never taught how to teach. It's okay, what do I have to share with these people? What can I really drill down? What are the actual lessons? And my dad, who's a college professor, I was talking to him about it and he was like, just get them talking. And I think that's really true of writing in particular, that like everybody who's working on writing has some bit of like wisdom or insight or like something that's worked for them. And I think so often it's if you can create that container and focus the ideas, then I think often a lot of stuff like comes up from what people have learned and worked on. So I think there's no magic bullet. There are techniques and there are skills and there are ways that pieces come together, but so much of it is like, hey, this is what I've worked on. And I think we were talking earlier about what does my day look like? What does my job look like? And I often think about it as, okay, here's the pie. What are the different pieces of the pie? And the teaching is like a piece of that. That's really helpful for me too, because I spend so much time, you know, by myself in my head, thinking and writing. And it feels really good to be able to like talk about that with other people and have a space to like that gives me a lot of energy to be like, what are you guys working on? What are you feeling? So I really love that part.
Do you find that teaching opportunities usually come to you, or are you at the point now where you're like, I have an idea for a class, I'm going to pitch it to this organization?
A little bit of both. I think oftentimes places will have like an established structure where there's teaching. And I think that's happened more and more. I know how to pitch a book or pitch a magazine story. It feels harder to pitch a class to me.
Huh.
And like maybe
Well,
that's
like
a like imposter
when
syndrome
you
thing where it's like, who wants to listen to me unless they're asking for it?
when you hold a workshop at like a library, is it Telluride Library that asks you to do it, or are you like, hey, I'm on like a PR tour, like I'd like to teach a class at the library?
That one was them reaching out. Yeah.
Nice.
And then it's like now once I had a relationship established, like the first one was good and or went okay. And then then it feels okay to be like, hey, what if we do another one? Hey, what if this, like so much of this world that I think I didn't realize initially is relationship based. And I think like networking sounds so like icky, but I think so much of that is who do you know? Who do you like what they're doing? Who can you connect with pitching magazine stories? It's okay, I worked with this editor here and now they're here. Or like they can connect me with this person where they used to work. So much of it is that kind of like ecosystem of people who've been going through it with you. And I think that's true for all the parts of it.
Chris Aaron and I have definitely found that with the podcast. It's expanded our world of writer connections so much. And it's easy to go into it being like, I have nothing to author or to offer. And then over time, you're like, oh, all our careers are just matriculating in different fashions. And before you know it, there's this web where you're like, actually, I can help with that.
Yeah. And I think because there's no set formula of like, this is how you're like, you're on this step and then you're on this step and then you're here. There's no clear pathway. I think we're all just kind of like hacking through it and trying to figure out the pieces. So I think it's so valuable to be like, okay, what are you? And I think you guys are really generous with this. Okay, here's where I'm like trying to figure it out, or here's like what's worked, or here's what feels hard. Because we're all trying to do that in some different way.
I know we joked very early in the episode that like, oh, once I get a book, I'm a real writer. But there is that feeling amongst writers who don't have books, inevitably. That everyone is always like, once I get the book,
yeah, that person has to figure it out. Or I feel like it's like, I get a lot of like, oh, you're writing a book. Are you publishing it yourself? And no shade to self-publishing, but like I have this like, no, I'm real. Like it's like that, those external, how you're perceived still feels important to me, even though I wish it didn't, because it's like, I want some kind of legitimacy.
Totally. I'm still seeking that comma after my name where it's like, Kelton Wright, this thing.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when I'm like, oh, I'm a writer, people are like, oh, that's cute. Are you in the attic with your typewriter and your biscuits? What does it mean to like be a writer?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
someone biscuits. I met a long time ago here. They knew that I wrote the newsletter, but they didn't know much else about me because we had just met. And they were like, how do you make money? And so they had this impression that I was like this trust funder writing my blog in my cabin.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough when you're trying to break into the scene to have this complex picture of yourself and what you do without being like, here's my list of things. And like you said, when you see someone over and over at the coffee shop, it does give you that in a way that like in LA, I think it is a lot harder because you really got to go to the right coffee shop if you want that to happen.
No one's going to look at you in a coffee shop. They're going to be like, leave me alone.
I think our conception of what it means to be a writer is dated in a lot of ways. And I think this happened when I was like first starting in journalism. It was like right when the internet was becoming a thing, like social media was becoming a thing. And there was this real divide in legitimacy between print and digital, even though we could tell how many more people were reading those digital stories. And if there was sort of this ego leveling, and I think that's true now, where it's okay, somebody publishes a book versus a Substack, potentially way more people are reading that Substack and it's impacting them than the book, but there still is this sort of dated, this is legit and this isn't.
Chris Aaron, do you want to ask the last two questions?
Sure. Kelton was like, I'm really sick. I'm going to need you to help with this interview today. And then I just sat
I'm like,
quiet for an hour.
I mean, I think it, it's like, I've read your work. I know you. So obviously when I see you, Heather, I'm like, I have questions for you.
Of course, of course. So the first one is that we like to ask a lot of our guests is, how do you approach being a good literary citizen?
Love that question. I think for a long time, I was sort of looking for literary community. I was like, I want to plug into the thing. And I think now, and I think this feels true in a lot of different parts of my life, where it's like, we're the grown-ups now. If you want the thing, you have to create it. You can't just expect somebody to show up. So I think it's like, it is building those community, like asking people to come on writing dates, offering up workshops, starting a podcast. It's like creating those spaces that other people can then flow into. And I think that feels, I think this is, like it's true in politics right now. It's true in so many places where it's like, things are not just going to happen for us. We need to build the infrastructure we want to exist. And that's hard. And like, my life is busy. Your guys' life, like we've all got all this stuff going on. Like that takes work, but it's not going to exist if somebody doesn't build it. And why not me? And I think the other thing I think about a lot, do you guys know the writer Anne Friedman?
Oh yeah. No, Anne.
Yeah.
I went to a retreat with her in Guatemala in 2014.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. See, it's like building those things.
She's awesome.
But she has this thing that I think about all the time, where it's like in, work and achieving and climbing the ladder or whatever, it's like you always think about sucking up or kissing up to the people above you. And she's like, we need to not be kissing up. We need to be kissing sideways, because those are the people that we're coming up with. So I think I think about that a lot, and I think so often writing, and I think journalism, especially where you're like pitching stories into magazines that have limited space. I think this feels true about book stuff. It can feel competitive, and it can feel like, oh, that person got that thing and I'm not getting that thing because they got it. It can feel narrow, and there can be like scarcity. I feel that, but I think that sense of we're going to build the thing together and I want to elevate the people around me. I know for me that has only made things feel better and made me feel like I'm part of something, versus being like elbows out. I'm not going to share my sources or tell people how much I got paid, or, that kind of like
also really good
versus
about
competitive.
Yeah, lifting voices that are emerging. That's like a feature
Yeah.
she has in the Anne Friedman weekly newsletter. If you're not familiar, is a great newsletter to our listeners. She features people that I've never heard of, and she has the platform now to do it. And I think it's really cool that that's how she uses it, because I think it's like when you are at the bottom, you're just looking at everyone above you. It's easy to forget once you're climbing to be like, do you need some help down there?
Yeah.
Like where
or it
you
feels
once
really
were.
hard to break through. And I think it's like our currency is our voices and our writing in so many ways. So it's, if you can give somebody's voice a little bit of space, that can be so huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Last
so not being a
question.
jerk, I think, is like the answer to the question.
Don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Last question. What 3 books are top of mind for you right now?
Oh man. I was thinking about this last night and then I forgot to actually think about it. I just finished the new Patrick Radden Keefe book, London Falling. Have you guys seen anything about this?
A little bit.
Yeah, he's a journalist. He's also made some really great podcasts. He's a journalist I really love. He wrote a book about the Sackler family and how drugs have percolated out into the US. And this book is about this kid in London who maybe commits suicide by jumping off a balcony. And then there's all this sort of like intrigue about it. And the topic wasn't necessarily something I was into, but I love his writing. So I was like, I'll pick it up. And we were out camping last weekend and I was sitting there and my husband was making breakfast and I was just like, holy shit the whole time. Because he's so good at pacing and like he'll kind of drop in some breadcrumbs about something, like about the Russian mafia, and then all of a sudden it comes back in the next chapter. The way he weaves things together is so smart. And I think sometimes that is hard about being a writer because I feel like I can never just read something without thinking how it got put together or like how they did it. But like how he did it is so smart and so cool. And so just as a reader, you kind of like get your mind blown in all these different places.
I think that's the
Awesome.
benefit of being a writer, being able to appreciate not only the story, but how well it's put together.
Yeah, like the actual craft. And that's to go, what can you teach in class? The craft and the like, when do you give your reader certain kinds of information instead of just being like, here's all you need to know? That kind of withholding and then dropping it at the right time, I think is so smart. So,
my mother-in-law was listening to that audiobook, and my husband had read the article of that, basically like the actual like reporting of the original story. And he was very much, I don't understand how there's a book there.
Yeah.
But my mother-in-law Laura was just like, well, I'm captivated by it. So I think it goes back to that original idea of maybe you have to be the one that finds the story in it. Because like, your book, Fierce Country, it could be 3 Instagram carousels where it's Dolores was this cool woman. Here's the things she did. A woman you should know, It's really easy to make those things short now, but like having the courage to be like, I'm going to find the story in it, I think is really cool.
Yeah. And that's been hard or challenging for me in trying to pitch the book too, is that it's like, you try and give it a 1-line pitch and you're like, no, but that's like, you're missing all the stuff that's actually interesting about it. Yeah. And I think that, it's like, it's hard to condense all that. And I think if I was like, oh, it's a book about a guy who jumps off a balcony, you're like, pass, like not interested. But
all right, sorry, 2 more books.
2 more. Oh man, I've been reading so much smut, so much stuff that's not great.
Yes, smut. Yes, tell me some good smut.
Have you guys heard about Off Campus?
Yes.
Would not.
I've read all those books.
Recommend. Oh yeah. It's like my brain smoothing. I just read Jake Skeets' new book of poetry, which is called Horses. He's a Dene poet, and a lot of that is about the landscape that's like just south of us. Navajo Nation is just south of us. And it's just it's one of those books that I read and kind of like ripped through because the language was so good, and then was like, I need to go back and read it again and actually sit with it and think about it. Like that sort of layering feels really like the opposite of Off Campus. Yeah. I just read this book called Daytime Moon, which is sort of about this woman from like the Salton Sea in California who escapes, moves to New York, doesn't want to be associated with that, and then gets pulled back into this landscape because of a family story. And it's this really plotty book. I find plot a total black box, but it's fiction. It's really sort of plot driven. There's a lot of action, but it's also really place-based. And the scene is really beautiful, and the characters move through it. It just felt really alive to me. So I really love that too.
These are awesome. All right. Well, speaking of next great reads, where can everyone find Fierce Country, and where can they find you?
I think they should go to their local bookstore and ask for it. I think that, I don't know, that feels important to me now. And like, how do we get stuff out of the world? It's like, how can we get away from everything happening? And whatever, I read Kindle books from the library, but I don't know, bookstores have been such a huge part of getting my book out. And so I think if you have a good local indie, go ask for Fierce Country July 14th, or you can pre-order it. Pre-orders are like such a big deal for making people aware, like making the book infrastructure aware. And then I'm heatherhansman.com, and I'm Hansman on social media. It's a weird time to know where to focus your social media energy. So Instagram is probably the place where the most things are happening. But yeah, I would love to. How do you guys think about that? Where does it feel like you're actually reaching people?
God. I tried to start a new Instagram because I got shadow banned on my other account, and now I don't want to use either of them. So don't ask me. I'm like, just read the newsletter.
Yeah.
I think Substack is actually becoming its own place. I feel like people post notes there and engage with writers there more than, and are more easily discoverable than on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah. And like maybe a little more real.
Well, it's starting
Yeah,
to
really.
give LinkedIn vibes a little bit. I don't know, Kelton, if you
Mm,
feel the same
yeah.
way.
Absolutely.
But I feel like that is the place that I've been able to find people the best. We tried TikTok and we do cross post things there too. Instagram is probably still
Yeah.
the leader.
For like elder millennials or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the
Our
people buying
generation.
books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you read and also pay attention to the internet?
Yeah. That cross section.
Yeah.
All right, Heather, this was awesome.
This
I'm
was
so
so fun.
glad we
Thank you
could get
guys
you
so
on
much for like,
the roster for this season.
yeah, and I'm really grateful for everything you guys are doing for, getting stories out there and building that community. So this is very cool.
Thank you so much, Heather.
See you guys.
Bye.
Kelton, I will say I am very lucky to do this podcast with you because you have the most incredible roster of writers that I would never be exposed to if you hadn't introduced them to me. So thank you. Heather was incredible.
Absolutely. My nonfiction section of my library runs very deep. And I think we talked about this. I fell in love with Heather through Powder Days, talking about skiing in the West. And she just has such a great perspective. And it's such a good reminder that the thing that you're obsessed with, to just like go for that in your writing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a thing that definitely makes you you. And also, there are other people who similarly share your interest and would love to read about it from someone else's perspective. So that was great.
So what are we going to be obsessed with this week?
You are going to be obsessed with laying down and getting some rest.
I do have to actually finish writing the kickoff to Shangri-Logs. I can't push it. I said I was going to be back in June and I want to commit to that. And I have like the bones of the comeback piece. So I am going to write that. I will have to write the paid edition for the week. So there'll be 2 newsletters, whether I want to do them or not. And then I think I'm actually I'm gonna check out from the library one of my favorite rom-coms that I haven't read in a few years. Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. I just kind of want to revisit some of the classics that I adore in the genre, and then I might spend some time on the Caribbean love story just because it feels like so low stakes, and I can't work on the novel when I don't feel good because it's just going to make me feel at the stage I'm in at that novel where I'm like really thinking about like plot and structure and stuff. I don't have it in me this week.
Fine. You can take the advice that you gave to our listener and just try and have as much fun as possible.
I love that. Have as much fun as possible. Okay. What are you going to do, Chris Aaron?
That's a great question. This next couple of weeks in June are going to be very busy. It is the last week of school. So as of this recording on June 4th, which is Thursday, tomorrow we have this big summer kickoff party that Kachava is sponsoring. Oh, by the way, for anyone who was interested, you can use Chris Aaron 15 to get a discount on all your fun Kachava goods. I got a promo code for everybody.
Listen, shout out to Kachava. I do have a smoothie with Kachava and a collagen edition every morning now.
It's a great breakfast. It's got all, I don't want to like plug Kachava. They're not paying me for this. But it's got all your vitamins and nutrients in it, Anyhow, Kachava is sponsoring the summer kickoff, so I have to literally be there with the table and be talking about the company to all of my parent friends at school. And then we have 3 days of school, a very busy week next week. And then the week after that, I'm going to Canada because Boyan and I are celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary. So we're going to Vancouver and Victoria, and I'm very excited about that. We have one more episode left after this one. I don't know how much writing I'm going to get done between now and then. So I think that I'll low stakes goal, make it just one writing session. And to try and have fun.
Fun. I mean, that
Fun.
should be our summer commitment, but I do like that we're starting early. Have fun, one writing session for Chris Aaron.
Yes. Yes. I did want to just take a moment, like I said, we just have one more episode left in the season. And last week we told you all that if you wanted to write to us, to please do so, because we're going to be kind of closing down the inbox. I mean, I will definitely check it over the summer, but this is the last chance for y'all to get in front of us. And we did have 2 very lovely listeners reach out to us last week. I just want to give a shout out to Amanda Boyle, who was the one who recommended Rachel Maddox to us to have on the podcast. And she said, one thing I am discovering from the different author interviews you've had is how truly no writer's journey is the same as another's, and also how cool that is. She also said, I asked about how you go about finding classes and really appreciated the answer, and I'm now signed up for a class that is taking place this month. It is called What is Style? And it is online with the author, Garth Greenwell. That's so exciting. Garth Greenwell and I share a little bit of a connection. Not that he knows it, but he wrote a book that's set in Bulgaria, and I think he lived there for a while. So I always feel like a kindredness with him because we have that little Bulgarian connection. But that's really exciting, Amanda. And I love that you found a class that you're taking, and I hope it's incredible. And that's just so exciting. And thanks for writing in. And then the lovely Stephanie Gordon, who's written to us before, she sent us an email and she said, hey, Kelton and Chris Aaron, I've been really resonating with the burnout, exhaustion, and just lack of progress on goals. Your episode about doing something for yourselves inspired me to schedule a blowout and go see a movie solo that weekend. And annoyingly, taking time for myself was really rejuvenating. She says, I've been dealing with grief, burnout, and exhaustion, and while I wish we weren't in this space, it's nice to not be alone. So
Aww,
she also said she made 2,000 patterns for her online store, and she's taking the summer to update her website and create portfolio pages. She also, I don't know if you saw her email, Kelton, but she made a pattern that was inspired by your memoir. And she said, I also made this pattern I thought of for the inside interior leaf pages for Kelton's Woods memoir.
Oh
Very
my
lovely.
God, I'm looking at it now. Stop. This is so cool. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to share that. I hope I'm allowed to share that, but I'm going to share it. And maybe, Steph, you tell me when your website's ready and then I'll share it.
There you go. There you go. Our listeners are just absolutely the best. And we've gotten a very good response rate to our survey, but we're still, like I said, collecting responses. I'm going to close it on the solstice because I felt like that felt right.
Yeah. So if you want an accountability group or a retreat or merch or any other oddity out there, you need to rank your choices so that we actually make those things.
Tell us why you love us. Tell us
why you hate us. Chris Aaron did tell me that there were 2 responses that were like, not sure about you guys.
One said
even better.
One said something like, I find myself rolling my eyes at you guys often, but I still tune in every week. So do with that what you will. I'm like,
I love you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you love your friends, warts and all. I roll my eyes at my friends all the time. So
listen,
that's when
I'm
you know
telling
it's
you,
real.
I will accept a 4-star review.
We want to do better, and we can't do that without your feedback. So please, please, please take the listener survey and drop a note in our inbox or send us a DM because we really do love to hear from you. Our email, as always, is officialpenpalspod@gmail.com. The link to the survey is on our Substack, penpalspod.substack.com. You can jump back into Shangri-Logs with Kelton over the summer and read her weekly and, twice a week Substack if you choose to be a paid subscriber. I think I've been a paid subscriber for 5 years, Kelton. Something crazy like that. Shangrilogs.substack.com. You can follow Kelton on Instagram at KeltonKin. You can follow me on TikTok at Chris Aaron. And, one of the pieces of feedback that I got in the survey is that I need to post more of my writing, I guess. So if you want that, follow me on chrisaaron.substack.com. And that's all I got, listeners. One more episode,
y'all, until we get summer break. So happy writing, and we'll see you here next week.
Happy writing.